The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Welcome to another episode of Gate City Chronicles. I'm Kevin Avard, your host. And today we're going to be talking about folklore and cooking. And we have a guest who's from Ann Arbor, Michigan, or south of it, around that area. His name is Eric Johnson, not to be confused with the master guitarist Eric Johnson, but maybe you've heard of his brother, Alex Johnson. Anyway, welcome to the show, Eric. You wrote a book, and it has to do with the folklore of cooking, or the Folklore Cookbook. And so welcome to the show.
Thank you. So obviously I want to talk about what I've written here.
Yes.
This is what I call the Folklore Cookbook. Years ago, I came up with the thesis was about how does fiction influence traditional foodways practices? And so you say, well, what is foodways? Foodways is the study of how people grow food, they eat food, and the commerce behind the foods. Mm-hmm. I happen to have children, right? And so my subject was, how do you get these guys to eat something? And so what I did is I started making up stories, right? And so these are traditional foodways practices. This is how do you consume this food? And so I started off by reading nursery rhymes to them. Peas porridge. What does it taste like? Little Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet eating her curds and whey. What do those taste like? And so I used story to try to influence my children to eat. And so that began me on a quest of researching traditional folklore stories through it's the internet. There's any story you want, it's out there if you look. So I started researching through folklore sites, and I wasn't satisfied with the number of food-themed folklore tales. So I said, well, someone's got to do it. And so I started writing.
Well, some of the writing's very creative, and I can very much relate to, because I'm usually the cook in my house, and making up stories like tuna noodle. I mean, where did that come from, right? So you make up a story, and but I was pretty interested in the matzo ball, and even though it's folklore, it's very modern. Right. It had a very, very modern twist, and I'm sure a lot of people can deal with can understand that. But it was very humorous. There was one line in that it's called I think "You Be the Judge" or something to that effect. But you made you wrote a comment. Well, it must be in the mother's milk or something. Because the child floated. So that was very funny.
Well, I worked in a Nouvelle Yiddish cuisine restaurant 25 years ago-ish, and the owner and we always debated over the matzo balls, whether they were sinkers or floaters, right?
Right.
And so, because sometimes it's like, wow, you could sink a ship with this matzo ball, and other ones you're floating in the clouds.
Right.
I like a light floaty matzo ball. He liked the heavy one, so we were always arguing about that. And so I thought about, well, because, babies are cheerful, they're light and they're bubbly, and, well, when they are, of course. But so what happens if your child is so effervescent that they float away? What are you going to do to keep them in their crib? And so that was kind of That was the premise for the story.
So how did your children absorb some of these? I mean, were they taking you seriously after a while? And then say, well, that's another one of Dad's stories, right?
They wised up pretty quickly.
Sure.
You know, it's like a dad joke.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, Dad, no more stories.
I find them actually very hilarious, even on how sauerkraut came to be. You're almost explaining it as though, you know, it really happened this way, but you never know.
Right.
But did you, obviously your children must have read the book, recognize some of these stories.
You know, sometimes there's that separation between parent and child. I've read the story to them many times. I'm like, what do you think about this version? This is draft number 11, you know? And they're like, oh, Dad, please.
Yeah.
You've heard the story so many times.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
And so there's 75 in the book.
Right.
So that's a lot of reading.
Is this the first of 3 books or a compilation
That
of
is a
books?
Okay.
Okay. Of your best? Because they are funny, and they do grab you. I noticed that even your opening lines,
Right.
like King Arthur or you know, how bacon was made. You know, Davy Crockett, right? Everybody knows Davy Crockett, but
well, you know, I'm a silly person, and so yeah, it's the ideas come. You sit there, you go for a walk with the dog, you're at the park, you're vacuuming, and then boom.
Yeah,
the ideas come.
A quick short
right
story.
out of the blue.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, to answer your question, yes, they are the best of the stories. I've written probably 160 stories. Let me tell you, I've written some stinkers. So
Right.
no one will ever read those.
The Folklore Cookbook. Now, you can buy this online too, can't you?
We can get that on Amazon.
Yeah, and you can get it electronically. But
Yeah.
I'm curious. All these recipes are your recipes?
Yes.
They are. And
Yes.
What is your background as a cook?
I started cooking when I was 6. My mom was boiling the turkey carcass the day after Thanksgiving. And I went into the kitchen, and I remember I saying, what are you doing? And she said, I'm boiling the turkey. So I got the stool, and I stepped up, and I smelled into the pot and let the steam come up. And I thought it was bland. I'm like, this needs some spices. So I went to the spice cabinet. I grabbed turmeric, curry powder, some cumin. I remember discovering what cardamom seeds look like. And so I threw that in there, and that was my first curry.
Interesting. And you were just guessing at it at that point? This looks
Totally
good?
guessing, going by a scent of smell.
Yeah. And
So-
how did that come out, by the way?
I'd say really good. It was the best curry ever in the whole wide world.
Yeah. Interesting. So, and you worked as a chef.
I did.
Yeah.
I started off in restaurants when I was 16, and I worked in restaurants till I was about 32. And I worked in Michigan restaurants, and I moved out to California because, hey, why not after high school? And I lived in San Francisco for a number of years, and I worked a few of the nicer restaurants. And I worked with a lot of really, really good cooks. And so I kind of absorbed my knowledge, their knowledge. And and through thousands of hours of labor and cooking, you know, I remember I was a line cook for a while. And the general manager said, you know, do you know how many of those dishes you made this year? I'm like, I have no idea. He goes, you made 12,000 of those this year.
Wow.
And I figure if you do something 12,000 times, you better be good at it.
Sure, and it's got to be a popular item, otherwise
Right.
you wouldn't be making it. So, you know, my wife works at a hospital, and of course she comes home and she talks about shop talk. There must have been all kinds of stories floating around in the restaurants, you know, that
Oh, yeah.
You've any particular ones that come to mind?
Well, working in a kitchen is kind of like being a truck driver or a sailor. So I'm trying to think of a clean one.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got my accident stories,
Sure.
but I'm going to avoid those. And I've got. Okay, so it's like being an air traffic controller working on a kitchen line. When your restaurant is doing 500 to 700 meals in a Saturday night, it's chaos. There's no time for any mistakes. Well, one night, this guy just stopped cooking. He was staring at the pans. I'm like, come on, I need those dishes up. I need them now, right? And he looked at me and he said, I'm a choo-choo. I said, what? I go, you're a line cook. Give me that order. And he walked off the line, and we never saw him again.
Oh boy, that makes you think. Yeah. There's a lot of pressure on obviously in the kitchen. So in order to break up the air, you must have to.
Well, you're trying to please people,
right?
And it's what we ended up calling 30-second art, because if it's good, it's going to go from the line to the table. And we worked in open kitchens a lot of time. You could see the expressions on the people's faces, or at least I could. I was paying attention because I was working the ticket wheel and telling my cooks what to do. And either they'd frown and you're like, oh God, here it comes. Or, or sometimes their eyes would light up and they would just take one bite. You could see them savor the food, and then it'd be gone. They would just devour
and
the dish.
That's a reward in itself, obviously, for a job.
Oh,
well
yeah.
done.
So that was cool. Plus, you get to learn a lot about food. You get to work with the purveyors. You get to talk to, actually, because this particular restaurant was on the wharf, you get to talk to the guys who own the boats, who go out to the Marin headlands and pull in the halibut. And they've got stories, I'm not going to tell you any of them here.
Yeah.
But,
no, that's interesting.
It's amazing stuff, It's culture. It's fun.
Yeah. Now, getting your kids to eat some of these, the vegetables, did they ever have a problem eating vegetables, and you just kind of slip it into some recipes? Is that what happened from time to time?
Years ago, a woman said, I don't care what the vegetable is, put Cool Whip on it.
Okay.
The kids will eat it. And I said, I'm not doing that to my children. And so, I do make sauces. I change the texture. I do, if it's like broccoli, if it's cooked too much or cooked too little, it's not right. If it's, some people don't like the stems, only like the little flowerets that are on the broccoli, so you got to experiment. You got to work with your kids.
Right.
They're going to eat the vegetable one way or another, but which is the least painful for the parent?
So who would you recommend? Is this a nice nighttime reading? I mean, it's a book that has little stories, but it also has the recipes in it, and
right,
and fact or fiction little things just before you go into your recipes, which I think is kind of cool too.
Oh well, they're kind of factual, sort of.
Yeah, that makes sense, right?
Well, I like to say this is the only cookbook you can take to bed with you.
Yeah.
And because it's got the stories, and we all know that folk tales and fairy tales are good bedtime stories. The person I imagine who to read this cookbook is someone who is a foodie, someone who likes to entertain, who has friends who like stories and like to laugh and all like to get together and cook.
Yeah.
And just have a good time.
Sure.
Because these are silly stories. Some are a little dark, maybe a little bit Brothers Grimm-ish, but hey, it comes with the territory.
Right. And some of them are very funny, and I think I can picture myself telling these stories. I'm not as gifted as you are, but there's a very creative side that you have, and you must be fun at parties.
I like parties.
Yeah.
I like to talk, and I like to eat, so... Yeah.
So you can get this on Amazon?
You can get this on Amazon. I believe it's at Barnes & Noble. I think it's even for sale in Walmart.
And Walmart. Interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, Eric Johnson, I don't have much more to ask you other than the fact that this is, I thank you for my copy of this book.
Yeah.
And
I hope you enjoy it.
Oh, I'm actually enjoying it. And I do most of the cooking in the house. So my wife was actually pleased to see this.
Wonderful.
I'm not a great cook, but I do most of the cooking. So
I suggest try the hollandaise recipe. That's one of my favorites. That my mom has the note from my second grade teacher. I was telling the class for show and tell how to make hollandaise. Okay, and that is definitely in this book. Sauces are a gift. They're a trick to make sauces that we do ragu at home. I mean, obviously that's it works, but making a sauce is an art. Just a little practice, that's all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on the show. And so people can order this online. They can get it at Amazon. They can get. Do you have a website?
I do. It's authorericjohnson.com.
Okay.
And I'm on Twitter. I'm EE Johnson, and I'm there. I'm available.
And so people can give you some feedback on the book and on some of your stories.
Well, you can always leave a review on Amazon. I look forward to reviews.
Okay.
Because they're fun. Because all the ones I've gotten so far have been positive.
Yeah, I can give you some positive feedback too, and I think if you have a sense of humor, you like to cook, you're looking for some neat ideas. This is a fun book to read.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah. Well, welcome, and thanks for coming back on the show, or coming on the show. And if you write another one, please come back.
I'm about to release a science fiction trilogy.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Are you able to share the title now?
Nope, not yet. We're still editing, and titles sometimes are a little difficult. I mean, you write the story, but like, well, what do I call it? It's almost as difficult as naming a baby.
Really? Interesting. And it's a sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
I say movie. I watch sci-fi all the time. Things like The Matrix and
oh yeah. No, this is a young adult science fiction / action adventure. It's about a kid who's busted for stealing his neighbor's garage door to build a BMX bike, and his single dad sticks him in summer school for his punishment. And it's about how he tries to prove that he's innocent and he can be responsible. I'm not going to say anything more, but
soon to be seen on Netflix. Right?
I would hope so.
That would be cool.
And one last point. I'm an administrator for a writers group on Facebook called 10-Minute Novelists.
Oh.
And this last summer, we put on our first writing convention in Cincinnati, Ohio. It was very successful. If anyone's a writer who's out there would like to take a look at our group and get some good advice. We were also in Writer's Digest magazine. We were number 8 for writer's advice.
So if somebody wrote a short story, they could send it to you for review?
Yeah.
I have a story for you, and I'll send it to you.
Okay, great.
I wrote a little child's book on the monk parrot, Oscar the parrot. Yeah, it has to do with legislation, but we use the illustration of a parrot. But we'll throw it at you and see what you think. So this is great.
Okay, yeah.
Well,
thanks, Kevin.
Well, thanks for coming on the show. And again, when the sci-fi book comes out, let us know.
Will do. Thank you. Bye-bye.
And thanks for watching Gate City Chronicles. This is a fun interview. It's a fun book. It's called The Folklore Cookbook. It's a book that I think you'll really enjoy. And if you have a sense of humor, especially if you're a dad, I think this is a great book. So until next week, we'll talk to you later.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.